Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, viewers. We welcome you to the fourth session of the Rhetoric under the umbrella of the Revival Media. And there are many important topics that we've already been discussing, and today is also another excellent topic. And the 2008 economic recession marked the fact that capitalism is not a viable or sustainable model. But this was the second time that it was established. Before, it was established during the Great Depression in 1930s. And it was very clear, even at that time as well, that capitalism is not going to work. But still, it kept on going under the different variants of capitalism, and that was being advocated by different schools of economics as we look into the history of this. But now, again, after 2008, as I mentioned, after the Great Recession, it was clear again that this economic system is not going to work. On the other side of the spectrum, we have communism, which has also proven to be not viable and inefficient, as well as against the human nature. So now we are in this state of affairs that we don't know what's the alternative, what's the better alternative that is available. We Muslims believe, and we Muslims claim that Islamic economic system is a better alternative that we have. But so far, we have not been able to present a structured model for Islamic economics, or at least this is what is believed to be. But of course, this is not the case. We have an Islamic economic model as well. And a lot of people have been working on this model. We have with us the best person to explain these concepts to us. We will of course explore in today's session what are the foundations of the Islamic economics, and is it true that Islam doesn't have any workable implementable model, or this is not true, and we will also explore that what are the differences between the Western economic systems as well as the system that has been deployed across the Muslim world throughout the history. So to answer these important questions, we have with us our esteemed guest, Dr. Asad Zaman. He is, of course, well versed in this topic. He did his PhD in economics from Stanford University, and of course, after that, he has been teaching across many different Western universities, University of Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, as well as other leading universities. He has been teaching in Italy, in Turkey as well. He has served as a Vice Chancellor of Pakistan Institute for Development Economics as well, and he has been serving in different capacities with the institutions of Pakistan, with the State Government of Pakistan, as well as the Government of Pakistan. And he's well versed in, as I mentioned, in Islamic economics, and his work has been cited across the world in reputable journals. So we welcome Dr. Asad Zaman in this session, and inshallah it will be a great session as always. And as you know, that we had the structure of the program is such that we have 45 minutes talk from Dr. Asad Zaman, and then after that we will have 45 minutes Q&A session. We prefer the questions in written, that will be written in the chat box, but of course you will be given the opportunity to raise hand and then ask verbal questions as well. So inshallah, it will be a great session. As always, as I said, over to you, Dr. Please, you can begin your talk.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much for inviting me to give this presentation, and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So to start with, let me say that the issues that were mentioned about the problems in creating an alternative to capitalism have been caused because Muslim economists have accepted uncritically too much material from capitalists, in fact, economics. In fact, the dominant view among Islamic economists is that Islamic economics is just a variety of capitalism. With minor modifications to capitalism, you can get to Islamic economics. And this is a major misconception, but it is pretty widespread. And I have actually written a book recently which is entitled Islamic Economics, the Polar Opposite of Capitalist Economics, which explains why this is a mistake. But because of this mistake, Islamic economists have not been able to present a viable alternative to capitalism because they think it's just a variety of it. So in this talk, which is 45 minutes, the material I'm going to present is heavily condensed, and I fear that many of the issues that I'm trying to explain will not be understood very clearly because I'm going to just sort of bullet point something on which I have articles and books. So if you want to get further information and get more references and more detailed discussions, and then you can join my mailing list. So the central problem that we face in trying to construct an Islamic economics, both the theory and the practice, is that there is a huge amount of disinformation, wrong, false ideas about economics. In fact, and this is not something new, when Keynes was writing his general theory of employment, interest, and money, in the preface he wrote that writing this book required the author to escape from orthodox economic theory, because according to orthodox economic theory, Great Depression could not have happened. So actually the basic ideas of Islamic economics are extremely simple and should be obvious. But the problem is that they now appear very difficult because we are trapped within the framework of wrong theories, and these make it difficult to understand simple ideas. So why is there so much disinformation about economics? Well, this was pointed out by Karl Marx a long time ago. He said that capitalism works not by forcefully exploiting the laborers, but by making the laborers agree to their exploitation. And how does this happen? Well, it happens by the process of education. Economic theory, as we have been teaching it for the past 70 years, and actually a long time more, it tells us that everyone in the system earns their marginal product. Now, this is a technical term, and this is the problem, that mathematics and technical terms are used to hide very absurd ideas. And because of the mathematics, people can't understand what is really being said. So basically, the theory says that the wage is marginal product of labor, and the rents or interest is the marginal product of capital. And so what is really being said is that both laborer and capitalists get paid fairly. And this is fundamentally a moral argument. So if you present it as a moral argument, you can easily poke holes in it. Even as a mathematical argument, there are many problems. And people have explained what these problems are. But because of the disguised moral argument, it just continues to deceive people, and economic textbooks continue to teach this theory and get away with it. There is a paper of mine called The Battle for the Control of Money, in which I point out that economics textbooks say that banks do not create money, and economists believe that government controls the supply of money, and also that the supply of money is the main determinant of inflation. All of these three things are wrong. The Bank of England in 2014 published a paper which says that the standard theories of money creation are wrong, that actually money is created mostly by the commercial banks and banks are not intermediaries. Again, this is a very common misconception that savers put in the money and the banks take this money and loan it to investors. This is also wrong. Actually, banks don't loan money that has been deposited. They create new money which they lend. And also there is no money multiplier in the sense that the government can't really control the amount of money in the economy. But it's not worthwhile here to explore these myths of money. We want to go deeper. Why is there so much confusion about money? Well, basically because concealment of the nature and origins of money is very important to high finance. High finance has the power to create money at will. They can create arbitrarily large amounts of money. And this power actually led to the Great Depression in 29, and again, after 1929, a slew of acts were passed which prevented the banking sector from acting irresponsibility, and that prevented banking crises for 50 years. But then in 1980s, Reagan-Thatcher era started deregulation of financial industry, and this was completed in 1999 and 2000 with a couple of acts which repealed Glass-Steagall and created the shadow banking industry. And only 7 years later, the global financial crisis followed, following exactly the same pattern as Great Depression 1929. So this may have flown over some of the people who are not detailed, but let me just recap this first part. The economic solutions to our current problems are very simple. They are intuitive, they are easy to understand. If someone hadn't been brainwashed by economic theory, he would be able to see what we need to do. But today, if you at the helms of the policy, the theorists, the economists, the policymakers, the bureaucrats, nobody is presenting these solutions or acting upon them. Why? Because wrong theories have trapped our minds and they lead to the wrong diagnosis and wrong solutions. Implementing the right theories is difficult because, not because the theories, because the solutions are easy, but once you implement the solutions, this will rearrange the power configurations. Basically, it involves empowering the masses, and empowering the masses always means taking away the power from the power elites, the few people, the 20 families and the few people who are currently running the economy. But by the same token, this implementation will be extremely beneficial for the masses. So if the right knowledge is there, the masses, because of their large numbers, they have the power to create this change. But because they are, as I said earlier, the laborers are willingly agreed to their own exploitation, then there is nothing you can do. But if the masses understand what is going on and decide that we don't want to play this game, then nobody can stop them. So one of the problems is that because of this false idea that capitalism is basically Islam, so people say that, okay, let's just set the interest rate to 0 and we will have an Islamic economy. And this is really a very bad idea. When the whole structure is hugely defective, there is no point in making a small Islamic patch. To give a simple example, we don't want to implement the hudud ordinance for cutting off the hands when we're not providing basic justice, you're not providing basic needs, and you're not providing opportunities for all. So if these things are the basic economic justice is there, then it's permissible to cut off hands. But if the economy is highly unjust, then it is not permissible to implement one part of the Islamic, but not to implement wala yuhaddu ala ta'amil miskin, and many other commandments. So we can't do piecewise Islamization. And today, for example, there's lots of enthusiasm about creating an interest-free economy. And this will cause damage to the Islamic cause, because if we just set interest rate to 0 and don't do anything else, this will actually cause a collapse of the system. And then people will say, oh, this was due to Islam. So in order to get to the solutions, first we have to unlearn a lot of myths. In fact, there are so many that I can't even count them all. But I will just go through the major ones. So the first thing to understand is that we must learn to see through the moral foundations of moral economics. And this is difficult because it is concealed and unacknowledged, and economists themselves say that this is a positive subject. This is a science. We just study society and we explain what we see. We don't have any moral foundations. And the problem is not what they say, but the problem is that the Muslims have been deceived by these arguments. They also believe that economics is value-free, even though this is far from true. So this is part of the bigger myth about social science. The idea, actually, it's very, very easy to see if you study the matter a little bit carefully, and many people have seen this, that social science is just lessons about how to build a society which is extracted from the European historical experience. What else can it be? I mean, how do you build a society? How do you run politics? How do you run economics? You learn this by historical experience. So the Europeans had their experiences about building societies, and they took lessons and created social science from them. But the problem is the use of the word science. The word science is deceptive. And because we are so impressed, rightly so, with physical sciences, you know, the computer I'm using, internet, everything around us is a creation, is a accomplishment of the physical sciences. So we are impressed with physical sciences, and this word science borrows the authority of physical science, even though it is completely false. Social science is not a science by any means. But once we are impressed, and once we say that, okay, this is a science just like the physical science, and the law of supply and demand is just like the law of gravity, then we accept this as, okay, this is the truth from Europe, and we have to use it. So then we start to build our societies according to European patterns, and this is extremely unsuitable. This is the reason, this is one of the reasons for major problems in Islamic societies around the world today. So to unravel this, we have to understand how did this social science get started. And basically, there was over a century of European wars between Catholics and Protestants. Before this, social theory was based on the Bible, and there was a school of thought, the scholastics, which had developed economics and politics and international relations, everything. But because of this century of wars, everybody realized that you cannot base social theory on the Bible. Why? Because it just leads to failure. So they said, okay, we have to reject religion, by religion meaning Christianity. And they had to develop new theories of knowledge, because they said, okay, if once you reject the Bible, then you have to start building knowledge from scratch. So they developed this theory in which they turned science into the only valid source of knowledge. And they developed political science on the basis of their experience. Hobbes said that the natural state of human beings is war of all against all, because he had experienced this. Everybody was fighting each other continuously for 100 years. So social science was constructed on the basis of rejection of God. So there is no God, there is no judgment day, there is no afterlife. That means that man is just another animal. There is no morality except for survival of the fittest. And this world is just a jungle in which there is a cutthroat competition for survival. And this basic worldview underlies all of the modern social sciences, including economics. But this is not acknowledged. So if you want to understand social science, you have to see that social science is the religion which replaced Christianity in Europe. The moral foundations have been concealed. It has the pretense of being value-free, and it borrows the prestige of physical science. But the reality is very different. If you look at physical science, it has huge number of accomplishments. So you have computers, you have rocket ships, you have atom bombs, and whatever, refrigerators and washing machines and cars, etc., etc., etc. So physical science accomplishments cannot be denied. But social science, what has it accomplished? If you look at the societies in Europe, you have broken families everywhere. More than 50% of children are born to single mothers, and they grow up without the love and security of a safe home environment. There's massive social problems because of this. And of course, the search for profits by corporations has led to catastrophe all over the world. The oceans are polluted, the atmosphere is polluted, and the climate scientists say that humanity will not be able to survive on this planet. So this is all the effect of bad social science theories. So we confine ourselves to economics. Economists dismissed the warnings of global financial crisis. Lucas, who was a Nobel laureate in economics, gave the presidential address at American Economics Association in 2003, saying that we have solved the problem of recession prevention. 4 years later, he was proven wrong. Bernanke, who was the head of Federal Reserve, he applied Friedman's diagnosis. Friedman had said, Milton Friedman, that the GFC, the Great Depression, was caused by a failure of central bank to supply enough money. So Bernanke turned on the taps, and the quantitative easing policies that he followed injected the largest possible amount of money. It has never been seen before in history. But this could not prevent the global financial crisis, and it could not prevent the Great Recession. So the dominant theories about how the Great Depression happened are wrong. They are fundamentally wrong. They are easily proven wrong. But the strange thing is that these theories continue to be used to guide policy around the world today. So again, instead of going to technical details, we have to look at why, when a theory is known to be wrong, it continues to be used. So to understand this, we have to go deeper and explore why this is so. And this has to do with the power configurations. When Keynes first understood the major fraud that economists have perpetrated, he was able to see his way partially out of the trap. And the one thing that his theories did was create full employment. And this created prosperity for the masses, but it also reduced the wealth share of the top 1%. So counter-revolution against this was plotted and executed. There are a lot of details which are available on how exactly the top 1% plotted how to get rid of Keynesian economics and how to implement Chicago economics. And they were very successful in this counter-revolution. And today, the monetarists, the Chicago school theories dominate the world and the minds. So the key point is that economic theory is an ideology, and it is used to justify capitalism. And economic theory, if you look through the pretense, is basically the religion of worship of the nafs. If you start any economic theory, it starts by saying that your rational behavior is to maximize pleasure in this world, which is obviously just the same as worship of the nafs. And if you trace it back, where did this come from? This comes from Jeremy Bentham's utilitarian philosophy. Jeremy Bentham explicitly rejected Christianity, and he said that, okay, after we reject Christianity, how do we build morals? And he said, okay, something which gives you pleasure is good, something which gives you pain is bad. So the problem is not that they constructed this theory. Obviously, after you reject God, then you should maximize pleasure in this world. What else is there to do? But the mystery is, why do Muslim teachers all over the world continue to teach this deadly philosophy and even justify it on the basis of Quran and Hadith? So this results from a defeated mindset, which results from colonization. Colonization is just like the laborer exploitation occurs with the consent of the laborers, so colonization occurs with the consent of the colonized. A handful of Englishmen, there was a maximum of 1,000 people in the British bureaucracy. They cannot rule over millions of Indians without their consent. But how is this consent created? It's created by education. And the aim of education is to create a subordinate ruling class which is loyal to the English. This class will respect and admire the West and have contempt for their own culture, religion, and history. And the ruling elites, the educational process remains exactly the same today. It creates exactly the same respect and admiration for the West and contempt for culture, religion, history. So this has had a massive amount of impact, this colonial heritage, on policies in Pakistan. And I say this as I was head of the PIDE, and I was advising many ministers and ministries about what to do. And I realized that my advice is not very welcome, because I was trying to give advice on how to bring prosperity to the nation. But the ruling class only want prosperity for themselves. They don't want prosperity for the masses. So if you look at examples of radical change, how did China change? Well, you can find lots of books about this, that, and the other. But the basic driving force was Chairman Mao's vision, in which he called the nation to their ancient and glorious heritage. Basically, once you inspire the heart, then all sorts of manifestations occur. So he united the nation on their ancient heritage. In Malaysia, there were internal fighting between many different ethnic groups, and Mahathir called in the leaders of the groups and united them on a common policy, and this was what led to progress. But in Pakistan and India, the effects of the divide and rule strategy continue to divide Muslims, and we have fights between Sunnis and Shias and Barelvis and Deobandis and all sorts of all of these created conflicts were deliberately created by the British to divide the Muslims in order to prevent us from rising against them. Even the Hindu-Muslim divide is also a creation of the British. But you see how it's deadly effects today. So this is the end of part one, that the steps for Islamization of economy are natural and intuitive. Modern economic theory is the religion of capitalist societies, but this religion actively prevents us from understanding the real issues facing the economy and prevents solutions. So if we want to learn Islamic economics, we have to unlearn modern economics. So we get to part two. What can we actually do now? So I have listed some of the obstacles, but and there are many which I have not listed, but we have to understand that whatever obstacles we face today are far less than the obstacles faced by our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had a very the hostile environment he faced was much worse than what we face today. But the teachings of Islam transformed ignorant and backward Bedouin into leaders of the world and created a civilization which enlightened the world for more than 1,000 years. And the final message of God to humanity is complete and perfect guidance for all times. It is just as revolutionary today as it was 14 centuries ago. So we take these as axioms, and this means that we don't really have to work out very complicated calculations to learn what to do. We have the solution in front of us, we're just not looking at it. Today, when we have economic problem, what do? We call in the expert from Harvard. And for any other solutions, we're looking to the Western books for solutions to the extent that when I was VC of PIDE, I had a course in business ethics, and I called in the teacher who was a bearded man and tahajjud guzar and a very sincere pious Muslim. And I looked at his outline, and he was basically teaching business ethics from a Western text. So even in our own home ground, we are borrowing from the West. So to start the process, we need to follow Iqbal, who says that khira na kar saka mujhe jalwa-e danish-e farang. We have all made basically sajda to the Western gods of knowledge, and we have to lift our eyes and look to God and the Quran for guidance. And this requires decolonizing our minds. And what is decolonization? Well, there are many signs, but the most basic thing is that the colonized mind believes that the most important knowledge that exists today was produced by the West over the past 3 centuries. Physics, chemistry, biology, political science, economics, mathematics. And this colonization is automatically created by Western education. Why? You study for 4 years in a university, and these are all the things that you learn. You never learn about the Quran or the Hadith or anything. And in fact, you see that these Quran and Hadith are irrelevant to the knowledge that is useful today. So automatically, anybody who gets a bachelor's or even high school in Western education, which is everywhere in the Islamic world, you end up with the automatic idea that knowledge is produced by the West and that the Quran and Hadith are irrelevant for the modern world. So part of this knowledge is also economic knowledge. It tells us how to conduct our economic affairs. So if we want to rebut this, we want to break the spell of Western knowledge, we have to start with the fundamentals and ask, what is the goal of our lives? Now, you will not find an answer to this in the stock of Western knowledge. If you look at economics textbook, they say that the goal of our life is to maximize pleasure in this life. Why? Because we've seen that after you reject God, judgment, afterlife, then this is the natural conclusion. But Islam teaches us that real success is on the day of judgment. So economic theory tells us that society should try to maximize wealth because that's dunya. But Islam tells us that the life of this world is pursuit of an illusion. And Allah Ta'ala created us to see who can do the best of deeds in adverse circumstances. So the fact that another issue is that economic theory is outcome oriented. It says that if you eat something, then you get pleasure. The struggle doesn't matter. But Allah Ta'ala says this dunya is meant only for struggle. The rewards are in the akhirah. So the fact that the circumstances are adverse is not of serious concern to us, because we are here only to struggle and to show Allah Ta'ala what we can do. The outcomes, the rewards are waiting for us in the akhirah. So we start the process of change by setting our internal goals to spiritual progress instead of instead of making money. So many Muslim students come to me and ask for advice on which career should I choose, which path, what should I study, economics, computer science, etc., to make the most amount of money. So they have already been indoctrinated into believing that the purpose of life is to make money. So the purpose of life is really that we are given nafs-e amara, and in fact, nafs-e amara is an exact description of the Homo economicus, which is the goal, which is the rational human being of economic theory. So our goal is to go from nafs-e amara to nafs-e lawwama to nafs-e mutmainna, and discussion of how this works is given in my paper. So this is actually what we call the work of the night. Because we also have external goals. External goals are again economic theory and social science mindset tells us that the society is governed by the government. So we must look to the government if we want to go beyond the individual. Basically, this is one of the things which happened in a secular society because they were always fighting each other. So they said that common action can only be done by the government. This has not been the case in Islamic societies. In Islamic societies, the driver of change is the community. And so our goal, our target for action is the communities, the local community. It's the family, our kinfolks, our neighborhoods. Values are taught at the mother's lap, within families, and within the larger circle of extended family, and within neighborhood communities. Strong families are central to the development of individuals and communities. And today, the worship of nafs, which is being promoted all over the world by Hollywood and by social media, this is very damaging to love, commitment, sacrifice, and responsibility, which is at the heart of the family. And we need to actively counter this because this poison is spilling into Islamic societies and it's having effects, and you can see it. So now I've said that there's the effort on our individual self, and then there's the effort on the community. And sometimes people get the mistaken idea that one should go and sit in a cave for 40 days and then you can come out and work on the community. So if you work personally on becoming a saint, then this will never happen, and so you will never be in the position to actually make change. So Islam actually does not teach us monasticism, and this is a unique feature that we work on our soul by struggling to change the community. The efforts of the night are complementary to the efforts of the day. The two go together. So somebody said that one is the spiritual energy, the zikr, the salat. This is like the petrol for the car, and the activity is like the driving of the car. So without any petrol, you cannot drive. But if you just keep filling petrol in the car and never drive it, that's also a useless thing to do. So you need to do both at the same time. So how can we create strong communities? This is one of the keys to Islamic revival. We have to support families, prevent them from breaking up in this environment which is toxic to family values. And we have to especially support mothers who have been emphasized heavily because that's the basic training ground of the society tomorrow. If all mothers ruin their children today, our society will be gone tomorrow. And in contrast, if all mothers train their children well, the society will be wonderful tomorrow. The men have the job of using the masajid as community centers. Today we have lost the Shabbar mein bana di masjid to Ima ki harat walon mein. But this is the thing that the masjid is there, but it is not acting to create the community. Today, we go and pray in masajid for 10 years, but we don't know the name of the person who's praying on the right-hand side, even though we recognize them by face. So we have to work on creating pooled information at the community level and using this information to transform the community. So the community banks are things that can be created without government intervention. So basically, one of the things that I'm saying is that people, because of the secular mindset, people are thinking that first we need to capture the government, then we can do anything. This is not true. There are many opportunities open to us at local levels. One of the things is that the concept of nation was invented in Europe after the dissolution of the concept of a united society. In the religious era, the society is united by the religion. But after that, an artificial imagined community was created at the nation level, and this has been the greatest of the new gods. As Iqbal says that in Taza Khadaon mein bada sabse watan hai, jo pair hai iska hai mazhab ka kafan hai. This nation state has created enormous amount of bloodshed, unparalleled in history. So instead of looking to the nation to change, to transform the world, and instead of seeking to capture national government in order to bring about Islamic change, we have to work with communities and create change at the community level. So we come to part 3 of this talk, which is state level interventions, which is exactly contrary to what I have said, that we don't need to worry about the nation state. But as any part of any transitional strategy, because nation states play an important role today, we have to deal with them. We cannot ignore them and we cannot bypass them. But we have to recognize what these things are. These are creations of European politics, and they are responsible for enormous amounts of bloodshed and violence. And over the Islamic world, nation states were explicitly created as a part of the divide and rule strategy. And there is some very important book by Wael Hallaq, which should be read by everyone, The Impossible State. He says basically the foundational basis of the nation state is contrary to the concepts are contrary to Islam and cannot be reconciled. So the Islamist strategy that we want to capture state power to implement Islam is impossible to succeed because a state itself is in conflict with Islamic ideas. So nonetheless, as I said, you still have to deal with the state. So with the understanding that state is not a permanent solution, this is part of a transitional strategy. We have to deal with the state because they are so powerful, but hopefully we will evolve beyond that limitation. And states today are dividing the Muslim Ummah, and so they are causing great harm to us. With this warning, we go into study how what happens at the state level. So again, we deal with economic myths, and one of the most popular is that export promotion is the path to development and growth. Also, that the government must raise money by taxes and borrowing to finance expenditures. Banks do not create money. Inflation is due to money creation. All of these are totally false ideas. The truth is that path to economic growth and development requires development of local productive capacities. And if we want to build an industry in Pakistan today, we have to protect it from foreign competition because it will naturally be weak and imperfect. And free trade, which is recommended by economists, benefits the strong economies and destroys the weak. So today, Pakistan is caught in a debt trap. We have exports of 30 billion and imports only of, we have imports 60 billion. So we need to borrow. And when we need to borrow, then we becomes enslaved by the lenders. Lenders are happy to lend even if they know this will never get repaid, because they get control of our policies. And using this control, they can get enormous advantages, much more than the money that they lend us. And the money they lend is just paper. So it costs them nothing to lend any amount of money. So Jason Hickel has calculated that the data was available for 2012 that about $2 trillion was sent by poor borrowing countries to rich lending countries, and a large portion of this is in terms of interest payments. So this interest-based system, financial system, is a tool for trapping the poor. So why are we in this debt trap? Well, basically, it's due to economic theory. Pakistan was fine. The crisis, the crunch in BOP occurs in 2003. Up until then, we had high levels of production. But basically, in 1995, Pakistan joined the World Trade Organization and started lowering the tariffs until they reached this critical point of 15%, and now they are around 8%. And when our tariffs are low, then the imports come in heavily because imports are cheap. And so there was a point at which we were importing oil seeds from Brazil. Even though Pakistan is an agricultural country, why should we be importing oil seeds from Brazil? That's because both our duties and our foreign exchange policy made the dollar cheap and the tariffs low. And so basically this destroyed local industry. And so it's useful to understand the history of free trade theory. It was invented by England, not by anybody else, after England acquired a 50 years lead over Europe via the Industrial Revolution. When countries implemented free trade, this created a recession in Europe and growth in UK. German economist List invented the infant industry argument, and he protected the German industry via trade barriers. And today, the WTO, which enforces free trade on the weaker nations, has brought great benefits to the rich countries and caused great losses to the poor countries. Here is a picture of the benefits. This is the exports of goods and service. If you look at the green graph, that's what has the high income countries have started exporting. And the gains to the poor countries are very low. The gains to Pakistan are not even worth mentioning. So basically the system is asymmetric, favors the free trade, favors the rich. So what can we do? Well, Pakistan is really caught in a big crunch now. And so there is a short run solution which has to be political. Medium term requires self-sufficiency in energy and agri-products, and this can be achieved in 3 to 5 years. And in the long run, we need to develop local industries. Self-reliance strategy is necessary, and there is a drastic version in which we can go full Islamic and say that we renounce interest payments on foreign debt, but this will have massive political implications, which can be managed. There is a report of the Council of Islamic Ideology on elimination of interest in 1980, which mentions this idea and provides a detailed step-by-step transition plan. It needs to be updated, but the outlines are there. Now, in a short-term transition to an interest-free economy, modern Islamic banks are the only available option, but this is not a satisfactory long-term solution. So, how do we resolve the short-run burning problems facing the Pakistan economy? Well, the main problem is actually political. We have power struggles between the bureaucracy, politicians, army, and foreigners with their own agendas and huge amounts of money to influence outcomes. And so the solutions require engineering a united front on defending Pakistan and at the same time protecting local industries from collapse, which is happening daily. In the medium term, we need to put all our efforts into creating energy and agricultural self-sufficiency. This will prevent us from needing so many imports, and therefore allow us the, once we don't need to borrow money, then we can craft our own economic policies. It's worth noting that we had industries in silk, mobile, small electronics, large electronics, telecommunications, aviation industry, and all of these industries have collapsed due to competition, free trade, and other factors. And this has caused massive damage to producer confidence. We need to understand that all of these magic tricks that we are trying to follow, that lower corruption, do this, do that, there are 10 forms of the Washington consensus formula: lower tariffs, encourage free markets. All of these are nonsense. They are meaningless. What we need to do is to develop local productive capacity, protect them from foreign competition, and stimulate them to grow into world competitive industries. And this can be done, and there are a number of methods which have been used effectively in other countries. In the long run, if we want to create Islamic economy, we have to eliminate inflation, because if you want zero interest, you have to have zero inflation. Now, the problem is that economists have no understanding of inflation. And to understand this, you can just see around the world that they have been unable to control it despite their best efforts. Now, we have a minority school of thought which is not being taught anywhere except for a few universities, which is called modern monetary theory. Modern monetary theory is intellectual heir to Keynes, and they have exactly an understanding of inflation. They have a policy recommendation for zero interest and zero inflation economy, and they have the mechanics of how to create it. So there is a theoretical basis. It's not Asad Zaman saying how to create zero interest. There is a whole intellectual theoretical framework which has been developed over 70 years since Keynes, and it gives us the framework for how we can create a zero interest economy. And this is, of course, only one element of an Islamic economic system. But another element of MMT is also providing jobs for everybody. This is also in line with Islamic ideals. So, but how do we get from here to there? That is a difficult problem. What is the transition process? We can't just destroy capitalism today and build on the ruins. You have to go smoothly so as to prevent major problems. And so some aspects of this have been worked out and others can be done. But the problem is the implementation stage, who will bell the cat. So one has to look at, there's no point in sketching a plan for transition if it cannot be followed. But some aspects which are worth mentioning, and I'm coming to the end of the talk, is that there are things which we can do without taking a revolution in the government and without actually changing very much. And one of the key things that comes out of the recommendations of modern monetary theory and also coincides with Islamic ideals is that the Islamic banks should have the motive of providing public service, not the motive of maximizing profits. So if banks are motivated by performing public service, this doesn't mean that they work for free. That means that everybody gets salaries, everybody gets paid, you get cars, you get your research, but the job is, instead of trying to make money for on speculation on stocks and real estate, you put money into socially valuable products. And so there are ways to do this. The first thing is to change the hearts, to make public service more valuable and to make success in the akhirah more valuable than the profits of this dunya. And Islamic banks are supposed to be like that. So we have to make them live up to their name. I've mentioned some aspects of how we some technical details, but since we are at end of time, I will not mention this further. But there are technical details of how we can do this specifically. And there are two specific suggestions that I would like to make, which are of importance. Islamic banks can get into the business of providing training loans. They can take people and finance them to enable them to either run their own business or to find jobs. And they can finance them and then get repaid from the profits that they make. Similarly, there are a more ambitious version of this is life loans, where every child is born is supported by financial support that he needs until he gets to be a productive member of the society, and then he can repay this loan. This seems fantastic initially, but remember that in the US, you have these 30-year loans for mortgages. So banks can make long-term loans and they get paid gradually over time. And also, in fact, in the US, the universities are working exactly on this model. The huge amount of tuition is charged. Students who go into medicine acquire loans of maybe something like $500,000, and then they spend their lives paying it off. Of course, that's very exploitative, but the point is that the model is operational. One can educate students by providing them with loans and then get repaid by their earnings. So MMT is economic theory which is very much aligned with Islamic values, not perfectly, but sufficiently to, and it provides a theoretical framework of how we can operate in the modern world and how we can implement Islamic ideals. And so basically, so these are the concluding remarks. Islamic economics is not just a zero interest rate system. It is a just economic system. It provides basic needs for all. It provides equal opportunities for all. Education is especially equally available to all of same quality. And everyone who wants to contribute productively to society must be given the opportunity to do so. And there is an economic theoretical framework which allows us to integrate all of these ideas and to implement them. But there is a lot of political resistance, and there are strategies for overcoming this resistance. But today, I mean, we haven't even set our goal correctly, so it's not worth much talking about the political aspects right now. So let me conclude with a dua. Allahumma arina haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittibaa'ahu, wa arina batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabahu.
Jazakallah khair. So please, you can unshare the slide.
Okay.
You can see the full. Yes, that's fine. Okay. Jazakallah khair, Dr. for the great talk. And as you can see, I mean, all the viewers, they can also acknowledge this, that the foundations of Islamic economics are totally different from the foundations of the Western economics, as Dr. Saab has mentioned. And we need to see through the dazzling exterior of the Western thought to see the real evil in that, what has been the foundation of all the social sciences that Dr. Saab has mentioned. Again, Dr. Saab mentioned some good solutions, some micro, some macro, to Islamicize an economy. Now we will, of course, take your questions. There are already a few questions. I will begin with those, and then we will give the opportunity to those who want to ask the public questions. Please raise hand, and we will see the order from here, and we will give the opportunity to ask questions. The first question is this, Dr. Then how can we stop exploitation of labor in the market? Through self-sufficiency in food and security? I mean, this is a question.
Well, I think that, you see, in Japan, when they created these corporations, they just worked with local cultural values, and they said that this is like our family, and so we will take care of our workers like we take care of our family. And even in Pakistan, I recently, one of my friends who was Long's business professor, he was called for advice by some leather manufacturers in Karachi for a consultant. So he went there and he analyzed their costs and profits, and he said that, you know, the problem is you have a huge amount of staff. You should just fire some of them to cut your costs. So the owner said, no, I can't do that. These people are my family. They've been taking care of me. So the culture is there. Today, we are facing a battle between the capitalist structure, which says that human beings are worthless. So we only calculate costs and benefits. And our Islamic culture, which says, no, that we are all together. And basically, if you look at the Islamic version of a firm, then it should be run on the basis of the idea of joint ownership, that everybody is participating equally in the provision of service to society. And we are all equal as, you know, if you think of this in the context of a masjid or a madrasa, you see that at least theoretically, we have the idea that the person who is sweeping out the bathrooms is equal in providing service to the community. And he can think of himself that this service that I'm doing is earning equal reward as the Imam Sahib. So this is the concept on which an Islamic firm should be founded. And this idea already exists. I mean, you can't sell this to a capitalist because they're the higher, but you can sell this in Islam. So it's a question of selling an ideal, and actually it's already being done. There are groups working on Islamic ethos of business, and they are trying to teach this to various business firms in Pakistan. So,
the next question is that if riba is only a small part of the Islamic economic puzzle, why is it so strongly condemned in Islam? Allah and His Prophet Muhammad have declared war on it, and the only sin which is so categorically censored. So,
well, you see, Allah Ta'ala has given us general guidance. Yes, of course, interest today, if you look at the interest, then the Pakistan budget is mostly spent on interest payments. So obviously the enormous amount of harm caused by interest is obvious. And the evil that is interest is extremely harmful, and therefore Allah Ta'ala has emphasized. But the point is that if the whole patient is sick, and so you say that basically there are all sorts of account, but you have to sequence things. That first you have to cure the patient, and then you can give him and suppose that Allah Ta'ala has prescribed some exercises to be done. Well, first you have to get to healthy patient, then you can do the exercise. But if you say that, okay, take the sick patient and make him do this exercise, because it's even you say, okay, this patient is sick, but he should get up and do sajda in namaz, and this is something he cannot do, then maybe he will die, because even though this is the amr of Allah. So, I mean, things are according to situations, and this is the situation which has occurred 14 centuries after the beginning of Islam, and it's actually very local and very temporary. So Allah Ta'ala did not prescribe exactly what to do at what time 14 centuries ago. He gave general principles, and we have to use our own sense to prioritize the sequencing. This is really the only issue of sequencing. Should we, because Allah Ta'ala says that this is haram and against, should we immediately set interest to 0 and not worry about all of the other haram things that we are doing? This is not the only haram thing that we're doing.
Yeah, yes, of course. The issue is the Lord didn't say that, you know, it's not a big deal. I mean, the issue is that the other matters as well that need to be resolved besides that. So I think this is the answer to this question. And next question is from Mr. Junaid. He says, in context of Pakistan, you mentioned ruling elite is a product of Lord Macaulay's education system, and they have typical mindset and don't welcome Islamic suggestions regarding economic system. So if so, I want to ask whether it is possible to run a pilot scale economic system by a private organization or a tanzeem working for the Islamic revival to carry out all the businesses, just like Akhuwat has started up its own system of providing loans to traditional banking system. Yes, I wanted to ask this question as well. I think I will add upon that as well. What about the Akhuwat model? I mean, because you mentioned the community is working together and a private enterprise that could also function beside the strong state. So yes, this is a good question.
Yes, I think that there is a lot of room to maneuver. The people have the misconception that the government is all powerful. The government is very weak, unable to monitor. My own fear is the education sector, and the government does have HEC which prescribes syllabus, but there's in the classroom when I go, I can teach anything I want. And similarly, I can work on, and I am working on getting people to understand and realize that this economic theory we are teaching is just poison. It's anti-Islamic. It's almost like teaching kufr to our students, and we should not be doing that. So in my own sphere, I have freedom of action. Similarly, the businessman has freedom of action, and the person who is living in the community has freedom of action. There's lots of room for action of many different kinds. So yes, there is a room to set up pilots and models, and this has been done successfully in many different places over the Islamic world. And as we take these steps and we build these Islamic model institutions at the ground roots level, and we create these small cells, then eventually the strength will be there to combine these into an organic platform and build some superstructure on top of it.
Okay, that's fine.
Today, I mean, what happens really is that people try to seize power, and they have not done the prep work. Even Shah Waliul Sayyid Ahmed Shahid made this mistake that he tried to implement Sharia, and he sent his amirs all over and he was the greatest Sufi and greatest alim that our area has seen. And his amirs were murdered by the local communities because they didn't want the implement of the Sharia. First, we must make sure that the public wants the implement of Sharia. Then, and how to do that is by creating living models of Sharia and making it attractive. Today, we just want to impose Sharia from the top, and this cannot be done.
Okay. Yes. Another question about the work of Muhammad Yunus.
I just mentioned about that in a minute.
Yes, how he changed the economic outlook of Bangladesh. Say a few words in this regard, and how this model is this model could be compared with the model of the Akhuwat that is deployed by Akhuwat.
Well, there is some dispute and discussion about the model, and there are some good and bad elements in it. But the thing that I want to pick from it is that it is community-based, and that is the center of the Islamic effort. And that is the only way to do many of the things that we want to do. Community-based solutions. We want to make sure that there's no one hungry in my community. Let's just make sure that this is true. Then there will be no one hungry in Pakistan. And similarly, make sure that there's no one uneducated. And if there is somebody who has talent and he has no job, let's just meet at the masjid and find him a suitable opportunity. We don't have to wait for the government to open up a school.
Okay, so the next question is from Mr. Humair Abdullah. The question is: in view of present economic crisis facing Pakistan, is going for a default is a viable option to enable us to restructure economy?
Yes, indeed, but that requires a visionary leadership, which we don't seem to have. It is possible, yes. Going for a default is actually a very viable solution, and it has been practiced by other nations. You just need some political skill to be able to do it.
We can't trust the current politicians and the leaders.
That's the problem. I mean, there's no unity. If we could sit together at the table, all of the parties which are and come up with a plan, there are many viable options.
Okay. Mr. Nazir has, okay, this is fine. There's one question from Mahmoud. This is fine, just asking for the recording. Yes, recording would be available straight away in the group. If you have joined the Rhetoric group, you will find the recording straight away. But of course, the edited version will be available on our media channels, YouTube as well as Facebook later on. Now, the question is from Mr. Asad. Why do we need zero inflation to have zero interest? What is the relationship?
Yes. Well, basically, if you have inflation in the economy and you give zero interest loan, then you are giving money at negative interest. So basically, you're giving away money for free. It is possible to run an economy like this, but it becomes difficult because basically those people who want to exploit are given chances to do so. So basically, if you can borrow money at negative cost, and if you use it for good, then there is no harm in it. Actually, you can run a negative, but the possibility of people who have bad intent borrowing a lot of money and using it in bad ways becomes much greater, and so there is a huge risk to the economy of when you have a negative real interest rate.
Okay, fine. Another question from Mr. Owais is that who creates and controls money in Islamic economy? What characteristics money should have? That's a very important question.
Yes. Now, to understand the answer to this, you have to see that you have to differentiate between the spirit and the form. So the spirit of Islam never changes, but the form changes all the time, continuously. So if you look at money, then you see that contrary to what is widely believed, the gold standard was operational for about 30 years prior to the World War on a global basis. And then World War I destroyed the gold standard. And even when it was viable, it didn't work very well for reasons which can be explained. But the World War I ended up with destroying the gold standard because the central banks spent too much money, too much gold for their war. So between World War I and World War II, there was an effort made to try to get back to the gold standard, but the monetary system between World War I and World War II was very different from the gold standard. Then in World War II, when war broke out again, it became clear that it was impossible to go back to the gold standard because double hit. So the Bretton Woods system came into existence, which basically made dollar equal to gold. In 1971, Nixon spent too many dollars and he had to delink dollar from gold, and the system of floating currencies came into effect. In 1990s, financial deregulation took place and shadow banking started. The point of this is that money, the nature of money changed 5 times in 20th century. So if we want to discuss about how to handle money Islamically, we can't dictate that this is the form that it should be. And many people have the misconception that we should just go back to dinar and dirham, and that will solve the problem. This is not true. Dinar and dirham are not going to solve the problem. You have to deal with the modern world as it is. And today, this is the current evolution. If we are in control, we may be able to drive the evolution of the system in other directions. It is currently going in the wrong direction with this crypto and other developments which are actually harmful for the ummah. We don't really even have any concept of how to manage this. But if we have an understanding of what the system is, how it works, then we may be able to shape the process by which it is evolving and do it.
No, so another question in this regard, that some believe that these cryptocurrencies and this kind of currency is a concept of community-owned currency, and there is a rebellion against the state-owned currency. So is it true? Like, I mean, because some people see it in a positive light. That this has been.
Crypto breaks the monopoly of the state to create money, and also breaks the monopoly of the financiers. But the question is, who gets this power? So if you look at it, then you find that it's the computer hackers in Russia who are getting this power, and so this development is not good for the Ummah, in the sense that we are not getting the power to create money. Now, some people say that, yes, we should learn to create crypto. Well, this is like starting out in a very backward position in the race. Why accept the system? Why not create, like the crypto people created the system which favors them? Even if we created an oil-based currency, it would be better for the Islamic world. But that's not the best solution, but it is.
That's fine. Imad Mehman is asking a question that, my question is how you see the popular startup ecosystem in which angel investors and venture capitalists provide seed money and take their share in company ownership and profit in return. Does this model comply with Islamic economic principles? I also wanted to ask the same question on your last slide, because you mentioned something similar to this. So is it like kind of Islamic, and we can adopt that as well?
Well, the model is Islamic, but in the way it is being practiced in USA is highly exploitative and harmful and damaging. Even the European version of angel investment is much better than the American version. And so, I mean, basically the thing is that the ethics which drive the American system and which drive capitalism is that you are maximizing profits. You don't care anything about the other person. So this is not the spirit. The Islamic spirit is that we are in this together. And on this, if you do it with this spirit, with the proper, then it can be useful. But certainly we don't want to imitate American models.
That's fine. Shugufta Ahmed asked this question: what is the current status of the Federal Shariat course decision to make Pakistan's economy 100% Islamic? What can we as students or lay people do to practically participate in the process? I mean, how can we contribute in this struggle for making Pakistan?
Yeah, I think that I have studied this issue. First of all, it's not clear that the government is sincere in its claim that
the government is not sincere, for sure.
I mean, they have withdrawn objections, but all objections have not been withdrawn. Private parties are still in the court, and if the government, if these stay the way they are, then the government is just making political capital by saying that we are not opposing, while secretly preventing implementation. If they are sincere, even then there are a number of obstacles to Islamization. But again, I think this is a big mistake to think that if we get a zero interest system, we will have an Islamic economy. And so that's really
another question in relation to that is that, of course, what should we do, because the decision is there, and now they have given, I think, 5 years to the government to do something about it. We don't have any viable alternative. Then, of course, they have a very a strong case against us. They will go to the Sharia appellate bench and do the review petition again, because they will say, you see, there is no viable option available. So, I mean, something.
I think that the greatest tragedy of the Ummah today is that we have been trapped by models coming out of social science, and we think that change can only happen from the government level. So we spent a huge amount of effort doing things which have no value, in the sense of not creating any change, and we delude ourselves by thinking that, okay, I'm not supposed to see any outcomes, and the outcomes will be in the akhirah. But when the opportunities for doing a lot of good are right in front of us, so eliminating interest is very easy. I don't take interest. Interest has been eliminated from my life. All right. So now, this is not a big deal. If somebody is taking interest, then the question is not that he is taking interest and we should prohibit it. Question is why his heart is not connected to Islam. So if we connect his heart to Islam, then he will not be to Allah Ta'ala, then he will stop taking interest. So the elimination of the interest has to be done through the hearts of the people. And we shouldn't worry too much about what the government is doing and what it's not doing, because this is outside our control. We are, there's this joke that I tell about the man who said that, in my house, I control everything. So all of the other husbands got very interested, said, how does this happen?
How does this happen in the modern world? Anyways, so another question from Usman Mustafa.
Yeah.
What criteria should be adopted to find real community? There should be a harsh punishment for cheaters, something like that, or how can we develop a community, an Islamic community, in especially living? I mean, maybe I think his question is that under this capitalistic or democratic capitalistic liberal order, how can we have an Islamic community?
Well, you see, the first community that was developed was when the Ansar greeted the Muhajirin, and Allah Ta'ala mentions this in the Quran, saying that we put the love in the hearts for you, and if you spent all the money on the world, you would not have been able to purchase the love. So this is the basis of community, love for each other. And this is what needs to be created. And once you understand this basis, then everything else follows. And basically, the family is the pattern for the community. And it's mentioned so many times that if somebody hurts, then you feel the pain. So this is the basis.
Asad Zaman has asked the question and it's a very interesting question. Does Islam say about what does Islam say about nationalizing the huge sector in an economy, such as energy sector? Because with privatization, some people make profit from it. So, what's your point of view in this regard? I mean, I think you mentioned that that the state has to intervene in this regard. Anyways,
please. Yes. I think that there are some services which should be state controlled, and private control is extremely harmful for us. And I think that Islamic principles also support that natural resources, which are gift of God, should be utilized for the public interest.
But the argument against it is that with the current government structure that we have, they're not proficient enough to handle these sectors efficiently. So what to do? I mean, in this regard, the solution they provide is that to privatize and let's have some good from it at least, because all our sector, I mean, all these public enterprises are just white elephants now.
Well, it's a long and complicated question, but yes, they are white elephants, but to privatize them is not the solution. So China had the world's highest growth rates for 2 decades, and more than 75% of its production, actually it was 90% when it started, of the production was actually 100% when it started. It was all public sector enterprise. And gradually they have lowered it, but still, even today, 75% of the output of China is being produced by public sector enterprises. So there's no inherent inefficiency to public sector. Even PIA was doing a fantastic job earlier. So even we know how to manage public sector enterprises. But so we have to look into the reasons. See, the thing, people think that privatization is a magic bullet. You just privatize and it will start working. It's not true. And if you look at the experience of privatization in Pakistan, you'll find that it's been a massive failure for the most part. So there's no magic bullet. You have to fix, you have to find out why PIA is not performing. And the reason is not because it's a public sector enterprise. There are other reasons, and then you can make it work.
Okay. Next question is from Arif Irfanullah Saab. He's saying, I'm teaching basic Islamic finance courses at IBA. How can we get access to your book? So I think it's on Amazon and
yeah, you can write to me also.
Yeah, you can write to Dr. Saab as well. Will a gold-backed currency help? I mean, I think Dr. Saab, you have already answered.
No.
Yes, it
gold-backed currency does not help.
And then another question is that when the economic theory is flawed and resulted in European beliefs translation for adoption, why we teach it? I mean, they're saying if it is very flawed and
it's a manifestation of power. Actually, it's very interesting. I have discussed this whole process in one of my posts and papers. When I was studying in the 1970s, Keynesian theory was dominant. We used to laugh, and our professors used to laugh at Chicago School. That these people are just crackpots and they are ideologues. Then they created a counter-revolution. Basically, one of the things they did, and there's a whole set of strategies, was to create this fake Nobel Prize. The so-called Nobel Prize, Swearingen's Bank Nobel Prize, Swearingen Bank Prize in the memory of Alfred Nobel. This is not a Nobel Prize. And the Nobel Prize has protested the use of this name. Then they created this Nobel Prize and started giving it right and left. Every other Nobel Prize was given to a Chicago School economist. And they did a lot of other things to make Chicago School dominant. And basically, Keynesian theory was driven out of the world. And,
mainstream, yes. And then we have the Austrian school as well, I think.
Yeah, they are also.
Friedman. So, of course, these schools, I mean, because the rest of us talking about the Chicago school, because they are the proponents of the old capitalist system, the classical capitalist theories. So, Keynesian model was a bit, separated from that. I mean, it solves many problems as well, right, Dr.
Yes. Keynesian is, and if you want to smile in one word, Keynesian is about creating full employment.
Full employment.
So, at least people have jobs.
Yes. Even if you have a monetary policy by creating money, it's not an issue. The issue is that you have to create jobs. And anyways, Shugufta Ahmed asked the question that how do we convince the current Islamic banking industry that Islamic social finance is not separate from Islamic finance, but is inherently a part of it?
A very good question. And the answer is you have to do it on a person-to-person basis. Meet the managers, talk to them, tell them about Islam, tell them that we should be motivated by success on the akhirah, not success in this dunya, and that you have the opportunity to do service to the ummah. And there are people who will listen and who will say that, okay, so instead of making loans to those people who will maximize profits, make loans that will be socially beneficial and also worldly. You're not a charity, you won't donate money to causes, but...
Asad Zaman also has a good question that central banks can lend to, he's proposing a solution that central banks can lend to private banks at 0% interest rate and give specific window guidance regarding which sectors of businesses should be financed. The private banks can lend onward at subsidized rates, and there's a neat short-term solution can be. You agree with that?
Yes. This is along the lines of some things which can be done. Yes.
That's one. Avid Malik sir has asked that how much zakat taxable wealth is hidden in Pakistan and overseas?
What?
Because the government doesn't have any view of the real wealth that people are owning. So that's why he's asking that what is the zakatable or wealth that is there. So if we
Instead of
are able to figure out,
instead of answering this question, let me shift to a meta conversation. You see, let's look at God's view of this planet. Allah Ta'ala is looking at the amal which are being done. He's not looking at the amount of zakat which is being collected. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran that the blood and the meat does not reach me, it's the feeling in the heart. So whether people are giving zakat or not, how much money is being collected is not the relevant part. The relevant part is, do the people in their hearts have the motivation? Somehow, if we suppose we discover all the wealth that people have hidden and we force them to pay zakat, this is of no value and it means nothing to Allah. But if we get people to understand that this is a purification, that this is a worship, this is an act, then if they give zakat, then it means something. So that's what matters.
Dr. Saab, Assalamu alaikum. This is Abid. I asked that question. Actually, we work with some of the numbers. From the Credit Suisse, they're saying that there is a wealth of about 700 billion in Pakistan. But then the other sources, including the Zameen.com, they said it's about 1.4 trillion. And about 500 billion is parked outside in luxury properties and in the bank accounts in, for example, in Dubai and the UK there. So these figures are available. And we know that in the US and in Europe, there is an income tax instead of the wealth tax. And because I'm also from the US, we know there's a huge problem with the, middle class shrinking, and the government is going in the debt. The consumer debt is also reaching like 7 trillion, and it's going to happen in Pakistan also if they adopt the usury-based system there. So we see a lot of people talking about this, that the people are stealing taxes and wage theft and all that kind of stuff there. So I think the people deserve to know what are those numbers and how much is stolen from the government treasury. It's an important number.
Okay, so let them know. I have no objections.
Okay. Another question, very interesting question, is that when central banks, it's a comment maybe on your proposition that when central banks purchase gold, it affects supply and demand of the domestic currency and may result in inflation. This is largely due to the fact that banks rely on printing more money to buy gold, thereby creating an excess supply of fiat currency. And if it is changed to Bitcoin, what will be happening as it has limited supply? And my second question is about Bitcoin and its Islamic perspective. So he's saying that Bitcoin may be a better alternative. Anyways, as I asked this question, that is this a movement in the Muslim world these days. So again, this question is around these lines, if you want to answer.
Well, Yani, Bitcoin is like a machine. It's a technique for creating. Actually, if you understand more deeply, money is created on the basis of trust. Islamic societies prospered because trust was an integral part of being a Muslim. And in fact, if you read you see, if I write on a piece of paper that this is $1 and payable by me, and everybody trusts me, then I don't need Bitcoins, I don't need crypto. Crypto is created to keep track, and crypto assumes that everybody is a liar. Now, if you look at the tourism reports of European travelers to the Islamic world, they are always astonished at the level of high integrity of merchants. They say that, these people, they leave their stores open and they go to the masjid. And if you look at the doors, they don't have any, they just hang a curtain and anybody can go in and out. So this is what we need. And money is created on the basis of trust. If we have the trust, then we have something valuable, which Allah Ta'ala has desires and wants from Islamic society. If we substitute for trust a mechanism which just takes photographs of the people who are doing the transactions to make sure that everybody is legitimate, we have achieved nothing. I mean, we have maybe we will improve the transactions, but the amal have not changed. So we have to focus on the amal. The purpose of life is to carry good amal into the Jannah, into the Akhirah, and have enough good amal on your balance so that it weighs. So anything which is related to that is relevant and important. Anything which is irrelevant to that is
I think it's a complicated topic, and we would like to have another session on this Islamic concept of money someday, inshallah. The other question, interesting question, is as you mentioned that there are a lot of potential resistance in going towards Islamic economic system, and you have experienced it yourself when you were part of that system. In such an environment, how can change be triggered without acquiring the power seat? There will be no way that capitalist power tycoons will allow us to implement Islamic framework model.
Well, there are two things. First of all, we are mukallaf for the struggle, but this doesn't mean that we should be battling windmills. So we have to look, and everyone should look at their own sphere of action. What can I do? Because you will not be asked about why there was an interest-based system in the USA and why the politicians were doing wrong things in Pakistan. You'll ask about what you did. So if there is something that you can do, then you should be working on that. Work on solutions that that are within your capabilities. As far as changing global capitalism, that's something that Allah Ta'ala will do when we make him happy with what we have done. And this kind of thing, this has already happened. And in 1929, the global financial crisis, after that, there were big chains put on the banking sector. And so next time, the next crisis, we will have another opportunity. And of course, we can have opportunity without a crisis if we implement Islamic law. So basically, the question is to change the hearts. And if people want to live within an Islamic regime, then these issues will resolve themselves. As long as people don't want to live in an Islamic society, then what is the point of imposing Islamic economic system upon them?
And you did mention about the both aspects of it, the micro aspect of it and the macro aspect of it. Of course, both things are important to some extent, but of course, as you're right that we have to prepare the society for these laws as well. Anyways, Said had a very good question from him. Can you give an example of any country that is not a part of the world economy dominated by large financial institutions and is doing well? Another question I want to add on to that is that the concept of autarkies. How does that work, and what is
concept of what?
Autarkies. These
autarky, yes.
Yeah, autarkies, the self-sufficient economy. I think this question is somewhat related to that. And also, what about this minimalism, this minimalistic idea of economy? So please do touch upon that. Of course, just to tell the viewer, we are exceeding our time, but since the topic is very interesting and there's very important questions that we can't leave. So please.
What kind of a life did Prophet Muhammad lead? It was a very simple one. One day he had to eat, the other one he did not have to eat. Islam teaches us sadgi, plain, simple, non-ostentatious living. So if we teach values of simple living, then we can have autonomy. Basically, then we can achieve. The question was, which country living in isolation from global financial system is doing well? Well, if you say that, okay, if you have a country like Afghanistan and you say, okay, they don't have Mercedes and they don't have this and that and the other, that's not, if you make that the standard of judgment, that's not relevant. Of course, you look at Afghanistan, there are other problems that they are facing economically, so we can't say that they are doing well. And the Quran tells us that we should urge the feeding of the poor. So, but it is certainly easy to imagine an economy where people are living at very minimal levels of existence, but everyone is happy and content and able to worship Allah Ta'ala in the manner He wants it. But they don't have washing machines, and they don't have luxuries, and they don't have. So by modern standards, you would say, okay, they're not doing well. They're not connected to the financial system. They don't have the latest computers, but they're doing well according to Islam. Allah Ta'ala mentioned in the Holy Quran this group, Ashabul Ukhdud, and they were burned. So by all worldly standards, these people were unsuccessful. But Allah Ta'ala's eyes, they were the most successful ones because they held on to their deen. Even
as examples, can we say that the Iran or the Russia, because of the sanctions that they have in place on them, still they are performing well, and on the basis of some kind of self-sufficient economic model?
Yeah, you see, this is the great issue that when we accept capitalist mindset, then there is only one way to evaluate success, and that is the more money you have, the more successful you are, and the more goods you have, the more success. So power, pleasure, profits, these are the metrics by which you use. But if we abandon those metrics, then there are many, many other metrics, including human development, and of course we have Islamic metric, which is completely different. So these issues are.
Fine. Another question is that isn't it true that Prophet Muhammad only reformed the existing economic system of his time according to the spirit of Islam, and not install some new system, only removed unjust practices and gave some general principles that should replace the wrong principles of existing system? So this is also
yes. I fully agree with that. The same thing, we have general principles of justice, and we need to apply them to modern system. We cannot turn back the clock and say, let's go to the dinar and dirham system of Medina and let's start riding camels and abandon cars.
The question is that in the long run, will there be banks in Islamic economy? I mean, is there room for banks in the Islamic economy?
Well, if you look at the 1,000 years of Islamic civilization's dominance, there weren't any banks. And I have discussed this in detail in a paper which is called Building Genuine Islamic Financial Institutions. Every institution actually represents a collective intention of the society. So in the West, there were no banks. If you read Shylock the Jew, by only the Jews were loaning money, and that's because the idea of accumulating wealth was repugnant to Christian ideals. So the society did not tolerate the accumulation of wealth. But through a process which has been described by a number of authors, eventually greed and pursuit of wealth became not only acceptable but desirable. Once this became desirable, then the institution to enable this came into existence. So the banks are the institutions which enable the accumulation of wealth. This is not a desirable thing, and it's not compatible with Islam. In Islamic society, the people who had accessed wealth created waqf with them. Instead of purchasing this dunya, they used to purchase the akhirah. So in the Ottoman Empire, 1/3 of the lands were registered for awqaf. So use the wealth to buy akhirah. And so that's why the financial institution, which is central to Islamic society, is the waqf, not the bank. Although banks can exist, but they will be specialized and limited purpose.
That's fine. I think you have raised your hand.
Ashraf Khan, sir?
Please ask the question.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Saab, I mean, just
the lecture, I think I've seen your hand since the beginning.
What's that?
It's been
you have been very patient.
Basically, I mean, as I understand, the wahi is basically directed towards the nafs of the human being. So without wahi, we go towards that pleasure principle that can modify into social or moral, but they are basically name of the same thing. With wahi, I mean, including taqwa that evolves into nafs ammara, from ammara to lawwama to mutmainna, and basically this the other name of the Allah's pleasure, and that's what we're talking about. To basically, when we're talking about the Islamic economic system, it's driven towards the akhirah, correct?
I don't really understand what you're saying.
Okay. My point is that since you mentioned nafs ammara, nafs lawwama, nafs mutma'inna, and that the desire of the nafs is to collect the wealth.
The desire of nafs ammara is to collect the wealth.
Yeah.
But after training, it can...
Yeah, that's what I mean. Nafs mutma'inna is what we basically call, that's Allah's pleasure instead of nafs ammara, which is my own pleasure.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we put those things in context, then, instead of getting driven on the current epistemology of the whole economic system and all the other ulum, my point is that we should have our own epistemology of how to generate the ulum of the economic system instead of, trying to basically work on the symptoms that we see.
Yeah, I fully agreed. The epistemology is crucial, and Western epistemology is dramatically different from Islamic epistemology. And this is one of the main sources of the problems
isn't that more important? Yeah, so what? From that, isn't that more important that we first work on our own epistemology? Because the current, now we kind of became, we are living in times when science is God, most of
Absolutely.
So,
the whole talk was all about epistemology. I just didn't use philosophical terms. But I said that the main problem is the false knowledge, and we have to replace it with the true knowledge. And the main problem of the Ummah is that we are in worship of Western knowledge. And what we need to do is to replace it by the Quranic knowledge, which Allah Ta'ala gave. So this is all epistemology. I just didn't use the word.
So technically, we need to work on our Iman first then.
Absolutely. And Iman is the fundamental for everything.
That's the Islamic worldview. The Iman, what is Iman? It's the Islamic worldview. Anyways, Jazakallah khair for the question. I think the time is already over. But anyways, just last question, just a comment on that, because you have been advocating Keynesian models as well. So these capitalists, they might say that your proposal is communist, communistic. So because you're also advocating the state intervention as well. So how to respond to this kind of argument?
That's not. Keynesian was a very strong, committed capitalist. So to call him a communist is nonsense. Besides, these are just ideological debates of the West. We don't really, all these systems, capitalism, communism, socialism, they are all based on worship of wealth. So in that sense, they are all equal. But there are elements in all of them which are compatible with Islam.
As they always say, there is some middle ground between capitalism and communism, and of course that is really what the Islam is, where the Islam is. But of course, nobody has figured out yet what that is. But of course, as Dr. you have explained in detail, it's really important to see the basis, the fundamentals of the Western thought, Western social sciences especially, in order to really see the evil that is lying within. Of course, that's really a great insight from you. And of course, you have given some great proposals how to fix the current economic system on the basis of Islamic principles. And of course, there are some micro and some macro suggestions. Some great suggestions from the participants as well. It has been a great session. As always, Jazakumullah khair for all those who contributed in the session. And Jazakallah khair also for your precious time for us that you gave to us. Again, this would be, there will be another session as well. Of course, there will be more sessions to come. We will, inshallah, keep Dr. engaged. Of course, there are many questions still unanswered. Like we need to get a detailed overview, a detailed insight about the Islamic view of currency and how this works, because the questions related to this topic couldn't be answered in this session because the topic was a bit more topic needs a bit more detail and time. Anyways, Jazakumullah khair, all of you, for attending this session. I hope that you would have learned a lot from this, and the great insights, again, as I said, from Dr. as well as from the participants. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, the recording would be available straight away in the group, in the Rhetoric group. If you have joined it, if you haven't joined it, please join it to the link that is provided in the message that we circulated. And of course, after the post production, this session, the recorded session, will be available in a much better form with all the pictures and flowcharts and all of the things. So you'll be able to learn a lot from there as well. So Jazakumullah khair, inshallah. See you next time. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.